Good morning everyone, Sakey here, Wake Up New Zealand. Today I'd like to talk about the UN. Yes, I know I've talked about the UN many times before, but this is quite a different subject. As a New Zealander, I feel quite ashamed that our country is actually a member country of the UN when I think of what they do. They talk about human rights, and we've got the countries such as Saudi Arabia as a leader of human rights in the UN, who actually throw gays off the top of roofs to a certain death, who stone women and whiplash women, who behead people, not just every now and again, but quite a bit, and it's often heard of, and it's not hidden, it's for the world to know. And the UN, what can they do? Stuff all. Because what they can only do is say, we must talk about this. And so they bring it up. Every 4 years, I believe, they bring up instances such as these, but nothing is done. China, mass genocides of political prisoners, innocent people kept as political prisoners in what they call training camps. We all know they're not training camps, and there's masses of them. So, and genocides, it's really, really horrendous stuff, and the UN does nothing at all. So, you think about the atrocities even the UN themselves have committed. They employ peacekeeping troops from many countries. Those peacekeeping troops go into different countries that are war-torn, poverty-stricken. They're asking for help. They're asking for balance of peace. And what do they get? They get child rapes. Now, this is absolutely disgusting. It's terrible. It's horrendous. And if a child was raped by a UN official in Geneva, Switzerland, or New Zealand, Australia, New York, anywhere else in a Western country, it would not be allowed. There would be a huge outcry. Yet UN troops can go into places in South Africa, in Africa, and rape kids. And you know what is done? The UN have said that because these troops are actually not UN member troops, what they are is employed by the UN and they belong to other countries. So legally speaking, they can do nothing about it. A lot of those UN troops that go back to their own country, they're not persecuted, or it's taken very lightly. So literally they get away with it. So in places of war, it's well known that UN troops have sexually abused young girls, young boys, young women, and a lot of these young girls have turned out to be prostitutes. UN peacekeeping troops offer them candy, and they blackmail them, and they just use their vulnerability to rape them. So what do the UN do? I mean, even when there's been shocking allegations of raping women and children in war-battered nations, the UN peacekeeping forces are just not held accountable. The UN are not held accountable. So, and they've abused hundreds of boys and girls, and that's been reported by a human rights organisation and on the UN's own records. So the UN itself acts as the police, the judge and the jury, and the abusers just disappear as if it's never happened. That's how it works. A 13-year-old girl was attacked by 3 white soldiers. She said 3 white soldiers told me to come and get candy and cookies. One of them covered my mouth with his hand, and the 2 of them raped me. I want these people to be punished. These are UN peacekeeping forces. This is horrific crime. You know, charges against peacekeeping soldiers of raping 6 children ages 9 to 13 and 13 to 14. You know, they were jailed for abuse, sexual exploitation, but one was dismissed by his government from 2015 to 2017. So it's taken very lightly. And many reports of these abuses are reported by Amnesty International, so it's a reliable source. So why is it the United Nations officials or peacekeepers are allowed to rape children and fail to prosecute them? You know, top UN officials have admitted that the UN has a very serious sexual violence problem. The UN Secretary confirmed that UN peacekeepers and civilian staff perpetrated 145 cases of sexual exploitation, also involving 311 victims in the year 2016 alone. That's 1 year. And they said that by their own admission, the UN's own admission. So between 2016 and 17, there was UN sex scandals in the Bosnia War, food for sex. I don't know if any of you read about that. That was in the early 2000s. UN peacekeepers were withholding food from refugees until they agreed to allow these refugees' children to have sex with peacekeeping soldiers. So, you go to the UN website, see if you see one single accusation of the UN specifically involved in raping children and being prosecuted. You know, many people in the UN have known for decades about this. Do you ever see New Zealand government, New Zealand politicians speaking up about it? No, it's hidden under the blankets, just like everything else. No, I ashamedly say that New Zealand is a member of the UN when, as far as I can see, they're a party to all these global child rapes. So I put forward that perhaps you could read a book or seek out a book called A Life Half Lived. To live with fear is to live a life half lived. That's an old Spanish proverb, but this book is well worth a read. So, United Nations operation in Mozambique. They recruited girls aged between 12 and 18 into prostitution. 12? Half of 12 countries where peacekeeping forces entered, there was a rapid rise in child prostitution. Pretty consequential, isn't it? They've got a terrible name. And these, the UN, are people who intercept and make the laws in our country. They even have an input into the education of our children. The UN Secretary of State said, this is a cancer in the UN system. So they freely admit it. It's not hidden. It just goes away. So, technically, the UN is powerless to bring about criminal charges. UN tracking systems of misconduct by the UN does not extend to UN peacekeepers, so those offenders UN offenders can go back and actually commit the same crimes again. The door is left open to further sexual abuse and violations. So the UN One World Government, that's the UN, they are the government to us. They're the global government. We don't have any sovereignty anymore. For decades ago, we gave our sovereignty away to the New Zealand governments. They just gave it away to the UN for them to govern us. There is no true sovereignty in New Zealand. The UN holds that. These bastards who commit these crimes, allow these crimes to happen, have power over us. And we all need to think about that one. UN, who intercept and make our laws, who are involved in teaching our children, allow sexual abuse of children on a global scale right throughout the world in these impoverished, vulnerable countries. And they do nothing about it. They have no power to do anything about it. So, wake up, New Zealand. Why are we being led by the UN? We need to ask our politicians. They need to be accountable. And by being members of the UN, New Zealand is actually a party to those childhood rapes. Well, let's all separate ourselves from that. Let's say New Zealand governments and their politicians, because not one of them speak up about it. So wake up, New Zealand. Thank you.